Me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we get into the things that have got you talking. Now, do you know that it was 3 years to the day that Boris Johnson woke up and found himself the Prime Minister of this great land? Do you remember those days? Such excitement many had in the Tories, but look at the state of it all now. Where on earth did it all go wrong over the last 3 years? I mean, it's only an hour programme, I could fill about 3 hours just on that topic alone, couldn't I? And look at us. Brave soldiers we are. We've managed to battle our way in despite yet another train strike. The government is trying to make it harder for public sector workers such as nurses, train workers, etc. to strike by changing some of the rules. What do you think to that? Would that be fair or not? Should it be harder to go on strike? And have you seen Rishi Sunak? He's got a 5-point plan, everyone. I do love a man with a plan. This is all about the Channel crossings. It's one thing having a plan though, isn't it? And it's another thing being able to enact it and it actually making a difference. Now that we're in a situation where people crossing the Channel are about to be put up in holiday camps, I mean, come on, you literally couldn't make it up. Do you think the 5-point plan has the answer? And while we're all struggling and strapped for cash and paying highest taxes since, I think, World War II, the government is spending a small fortune on equality, diversion and inclusion every single year. What do you think to this? You shout at your screens, yes, that is money well spent. Does it make the country a better place? Is it essential? Or is it a little bit of a waste of money? Give me your thoughts on all of that tonight. But now let's get ourselves up to speed with all the latest goings on. Tonight's headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story tonight: the Prime Minister is facing criticism from human rights groups after announcing plans to return thousands of Albanians to their home country. Rishi Sunak is being accused of treating asylum seekers like criminals after he also... Excuse me, I've never sneezed during a news bulletin before, but I do apologise. As I was saying, treating asylum seekers like criminals after he also promised to eliminate the asylum claims backlog by the end of next year. He also vowed to halve the cost of housing migrants, relocating 10,000 from hotels to sites including disused holiday parks. The Prime Minister says crystal clear guidance will be given to caseworkers so they fully understand Albania is a safe country.
We have sought and received formal assurances from Albania confirming they will protect genuine victims and people at risk of re-trafficking, allowing us to detain and return people to Albania with confidence and in line with the ECAT Treaty. As a result of these changes, the vast majority of claims from Albania can simply be declared clearly unfounded.
Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the Conservatives just can't keep their promises.
All of that has been said almost word for word before. But last time we had measures, the last time we had legislation. Plenty of newspaper headlines about wave machines, prison ships, fantasy islands, but no effective action. All designed to mask failure, to distract from a broken asylum system that can't process claims, can't return those with no right to be here, and can't protect our borders.
Looking at news from the Channel Islands now, and police have confirmed 2 bodies have been found close to where a fishing boat sank off the coast of Jersey last week. Larry Simeon and Jervis Baligar were crew members on board the boat which sank after it collided with a cargo ship in the early hours of Thursday morning. The craft was being skippered by Michael Michieli. All 3 men died. Jersey police say they're continuing with their search and recovery operation. And staying in Jersey, police say they suspect gas was behind the explosion at a block of flats in St Helier at the weekend. It was confirmed earlier the number of people who died in the incident rose to 7. The island's police chief named 2 people who are still missing. They are Ken and Jane Ralph, both in their 70s. Now, a 6-year-old boy remains in a critical condition in hospital after he fell through an icy lake in Solihull. 3 other boys, aged 8, 10 and 11-year-old, have died after being pulled out of the water in Kingshurst. Members of the public applauded a group of 20 officers from West Midlands Police who marched through the town to lay flowers in tribute to the boys. Balloons, soft toys and candles were left at a vigil last night. Now, the RMT Union General Secretary has apologised for disruption to train services as 4 weeks of industrial action begins today. Around 40,000 members are striking today, tomorrow, Friday and Saturday, with more walkouts to come over the festive period. Union members rejected the latest pay offer by Network Rail of a 5% pay rise this year, with another 4% in 2023. The Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, asked the union to reconsider, but Mick Lynch says they need a better offer.
To the government, our message is that we need to get a deal, we need to get around the table, and they need to show some goodwill and some expertise and some facilitation to try and create a document or a set of documents that we can all support. And at the moment, they know that what they're putting forward to us is through their agents in the Rail Delivery Group and Network Rail. They know that that's not good enough, but I believe we can get there. I'm an optimist.
Scientists in the United States have for the first time used nuclear fusion to generate more power than was consumed in the process. Nuclear power plants currently rely on fission, which splits atoms, releasing harmful radiation. But fusion energy, which pushes atoms together, is safe, sustainable, clean and cheap. The decades-long international effort could one day lead to unlimited energy, we're told, and aid the fight against climate change. Scientists say the process briefly recreated the conditions of the birth of a star.
During experiments, 192 high-energy lasers converge on a target about the size of a peppercorn. heating a capsule of deuterium and tritium to over 3 million degrees Celsius, and briefly simulating the conditions of a star.
Still no cure for the common cold. Apologies once again for my unscheduled sneeze. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. More now from Michelle and Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Steve says he's just tuned in, and what he says was that noise during the news bulletin. It was Polly. I'm going to clip that up, so I am. I didn't have the joy, though, of seeing her. I just heard her, so I have no idea if she pulled that really weird face before, and you know when you're desperately trying to stop yourself sneezing. So I don't know if it looked as good as it sounded, but it was quite spectacular, and many people have been messaging in. Mark is the latest, saying, "Bless you, Polly. Bless you." There you go. You know the drill. No, look at me. I'm getting all discombobulated about Polly's sneezing then. I forgot to tell you who was alongside me. Until 7 o'clock tonight, we are keeping you company. I've got my panel, the political commentator Emma Burnell, and a new face to this show, Asa Bennett, who is a former special advisor to Liz Truss. Good evening, both of you.
Great to be here.
Oh, thank you. That's the kind of enthusiasm and keenness we like. Feel free to echo those sentiments, Emma.
I'm always happy to be here, Michelle. You know that.
That's what we like, isn't it? That's what we like. Harry says, Michelle, you look like a licorice all sorts tonight. I'm not sure if that's a compliment. I don't like licorice all sorts, but if you do, I'll take it. Never say never to a compliment. You know the drill. Harry certainly does. He's first in you were tonight, Harry, with that licorice all sorts comment. But if you've got thoughts on what we'll be discussing tonight, get in touch with me. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email, or you can tweet me at GB News. A quick recap in case you've just tuned in, you think what's going on about tonight. I want to talk about the fact that it's a 3-year anniversary since Boris Johnson woke up as our Prime Minister. What went wrong? Some might say nothing at all, other than things outside of his control. Do you agree with that? I also want to talk about whether or not it should be harder for people to go on strike in this country. And Sunak's 5-point plan, of course. I can't let the show go without discussing that. And diversion and inclusion. We spend a small fortune on it. Is it a good use of taxpayers' money? You tell me. As I was just saying, our top story tonight, Boris Johnson woke up 3 years ago today, so he did, to find himself the boss of the United Kingdom, our new Prime Minister. He romped to victory, didn't he? Do you remember it? 80-seat majority, of course, at the 2019 elections. Gotta say, it hasn't worked out all that well, certainly for him. And for the Tories, some might say. Labour, if you're into polls, they're 20 points ahead of the Tories right now. Dee, she was my first email on this topic. She says, when you say, Michelle, where did it all go wrong? What about COVID, the Ukraine war, those kind of things? And put a spanner in the works, Asa. She's saying, loads of the countries are struggling. It wasn't the fault of our government.
Well, I can really sympathise with that because, you know, in 2019, COVID and Putin invading Ukraine were not exactly being debated at election time. They were events that came out of nowhere. They were like almost asteroid events. Certainly some people from afar would have been warning and fearing that Russia would have been up to more sort of military adventurism. But then, you know, they clearly were disbelieved, and now we're reaping the whirlwind, as it were. So in the meantime, the Boris Johnson government very much were being knocked about by all these events. Granted, you know, as Prime Minister, he then presided over an administration which had all sorts of inquiries about how they handled COVID, and there were challenges about the trust he would hold among his colleagues, which is why there was almost an unprecedented number of ministerial resignations in a bid to try and force his hand. So, admittedly, yes, there is the shock event, but then there's how he responded to it and the administration's response to that, which then precipitated, of course, you know, leadership elections, and obviously there's Truss coming in and Rishi Sunak.
Sorry, I'm showing flashing imagery on the screen as well, just in case I need to warn you about that. Sorry.
No worries, absolutely. And so it's been obviously a roller coaster. And, you know, granted, we remember very well that back then people thought he was, you know, king of all he surveyed, an 80-seat majority. He could be, you know, premier for a decade. And now it seems we're going to fit, you know, many more premiers, you know, in elections and uncertainty to come.
In summary, though, do you think he was a good thing, a good Prime Minister for this country?
I think he was a very consequential and monumental Prime Minister who'll be remembered for delivering things.
That's not a yes or a no, is it? Was he a good...
He'll be talked
Good
about for
Prime
decades to
Minister.
come. He delivered Brexit, which was one of the strongest democratic mandates the British people had given the government. And he smashed through the blockades that prevailed in his way. He got the vaccine rollout delivered. It was the fastest in Europe.
So you think he was a good Prime Minister then?
He has many things he can be proud of, absolutely.
Well, there you go. I got there in the end, everyone. Emma, good Prime Minister Boris Johnson?
No, he was a terrible Prime Minister. He's a very, very good campaigner. He absolutely smashed the Labour Party to bits at the election. But and I think I've used this metaphor with you before, he's like the dog that caught the car. He didn't know what to do with it when he got there. He wanted to then continue governing as a campaigner. And actually, he was stuck with two things. First of all, there were unprecedented crises, and that was a huge issue. But the problem is we also were not robust enough as a state to be able to cope with those crises. Other countries, everyone has had to deal with this, and they haven't gone through 3 prime ministers in as many times.
No, but they've all ended up in a very similar sorry mess, haven't they?
Other people are in more or less of a mess. We are considerably at the bottom of the pile in terms of that, and certainly in terms of our politics. Boris Johnson was not the man to lead us through a crisis.
We're not the bottom of the pile in terms of, if you look at things like inflation rates globally, we're not, by far, I would say, we're not the worst in terms of outcomes where we found ourselves.
We're a long, long way from the top or even the middle of that pile. And this is the problem. We had embedded problems, and this is something that when Liz Truss came in, she said, these problems are not caused by these crises. I agreed with some of her analysis. I thought her solutions were not sane. But the analysis was right. We have had a long-term deterioration of our productivity, of our growth, and stagnation within the country, which meant that when we were buffeted by these crises, we didn't have the robustness to deal with them. And Boris Johnson was not the man to get his head down, work hard, keep his head down, stay out of the headlines and into the crisis. He was just the wrong personality for that kind of leadership. He is, as I say, a great campaigner, terrible Prime Minister.
Which leads us then to, I lose track, but I think the one after Johnson was Truss.
Yes.
You was an advisor to Truss. Did she do a better job then?
I think she really wanted to. She gave her all in the efforts to try and do that. She, as Emma was saying, saw that there was historic problems being built up. There were solutions that needed, radical answers in a sense, like on energy security. How we ensure we're never left exposed in the same way by the war in Ukraine.
Did she do? You said she gave it her all. I could give it my all now to try and do a 100-metre sprint. It doesn't mean I'll be any good at it.
Oh,
was she any good?
But then in the result, she had to stand up before the nation and admit she'd failed and she couldn't fulfil her job anymore, which is, I think, is very clear that she basically charged like a bull at the gate and went too far and didn't bring her party with her. Because I think the logic would be this. Amid all these problems, very intense challenges, you had to have an intense way of trying to tackle them. But of course, then by sheer force of will, she would believe that you need to start cutting taxes when you have the highest tax burden in
Did she leave the country in a better situation than when she picked it up?
There was hideous legacies from COVID, the lockdown, and obviously the Russian war. So I think it's that it was the same sort of challenges. And actually, the reason I'm slightly swerving it is because much of what she wanted to do wasn't actually pushed through. It got gutted at the last minute. So in some ways, she wasn't able to have an impact on that.
So let me ask,
the energy crisis.
I'm going to come to you in a second, Emma, about Liz Truss. But before I do, let me just ask you, Asa. I've never been a special advisor for anything in my life, except perhaps how to make and down cocktails, which is not a skill that we all need to master. It's not very healthy for you. So I've never been in your situation. But if you are a special advisor and then you advise someone that ultimately failed in their remit, how do you then move forward? Do people look at you as a special advisors and go, it was his fault, it was her fault? How does it work?
So I know it's very tempting, and I'm sure some viewers will be pondering very much the same. I basically was particularly involved with speech writing. So other colleagues will be involved in the economics, the mini-budget discussions. I was very much trying to make sure she could, tell her story and to the nation and, put out the strongest arguments. So,
and say the word growth about 17 times in one speech.
Thing.
Yes, no, I'm not knocking it. I just that's what I remember from her thing. Growth. If I had a pattern for every time she said growth, I'd be absolutely minted. Some might argue that what she achieved in terms of growth was the exact opposite. But anyway, so you did speech writing. So then what happens then as a special advisor? You advise this Truss, it doesn't go well. What then happens as special advisors?
On that point, given the sort of mission to do everything to try and get Britain growing again. I remember very well there was interesting analysis, independent research that was done by a particular think tank, the NIESR is a very catchy name, that was showing that we would have been on 2% growth next year. That would have been fantastic for jobs, investment and everything else. But, that's why part of the tragedy of this.
But if you were, and I desperately want to come to you as well, but I just want to get this off my chest as well, because it's just something that I cannot fathom what Liz Truss did. See, I was a big believer in what she did in terms of the, the advance rate of tax, the additional rate, 45p.
Yeah.
I think it was a very smart policy, removing that. People start crying and shouting at the TVs and all the rest of it, and let's agree to disagree. But the timing of that was monumentally stupid. And I used to look at that and I used to think, surely every single person around you must be shaking you and saying, now is not the time to reduce the 45p rate. So how does it work? Doesn't she, or didn't she have special advisors around her saying, no, don't do that? When you were writing her speeches, did you just used to write, 45p down to 40? Would you say, no, it's silly?
I think it's that there will no doubt have been vigorous discussions, because she was very much, strong in her belief on this. She was talking during the campaign about the need to start cutting taxes, and clearly she wanted to be able to go that extra mile, not just reversing Rishi Sunak's national insurance rise, but also, cutting on corporation tax and really trying to be ambitious in what she do for income tax, because that's why she wanted to be able to say, we're putting more money back in your pockets. It's, very much your money not to spend, not the government's. But at the same time, she was someone who felt that you didn't have time to delay and get stuck in endless Whitehall debates and discussions and taking soundings from the Treasury on this, that and the other. She wanted to take action immediately.
Yeah, I've got to say, for what it's worth, I did agree with some of the concepts of Trussonomics. Emma, I want to come to you, and then if I've got time, I need to squeeze in yet another Prime Minister, because there was another one in the next 3 years. But Liz Truss, we went from Johnson to her. What do you reckon, Truss?
I mean, for someone who believes that Trussonomics is a damaging economic approach, I couldn't have been given a bigger gift than Liz Truss going straight for it, head first.
So you disagreed with all of it?
Pretty much, yeah. And she was trying to cut the size of the state, a state that had already been significantly shrunk over the previous decade, immediately, with no real thinking about what that means in terms of people's everyday lives and how that would be reproached. And the people who in the end said, no, hang on, this isn't going to work, wasn't in fact the everyday voters. What was in fact stopped with the markets saying, hang on, we also need a state that works in order for us to bring investment to this country. And they said, hang on, no further than that. So it wasn't even brought down particularly by a left-wing approach. It was the centre-right saying, hey, this is too much, this is too far. So I think Trussonomics itself really needs to be seen to... It's not just the individual person's failure. I, on a personal level, because I'm a human being, when I watched Liz Truss resigning, I felt for her, I felt sorry for her, because she's my age, we're almost exactly the same age, and she'd spent 20 years of her life working towards this moment. She's never going to have that moment again, and that must feel horrendous. As somebody who never wants to see that economic approach taken again, I was very pleased to see it fall so badly when it came.
Why would it feel horrendous? I think if I was Liz Truss and I tried to give it my all, like what you say, and it got rejected, it got pushed back, and I believed in what I was doing, my attitude, I wouldn't be sitting there crying, thinking, oh, that was awful. I'd be sitting there thinking, well, you know what? If you don't want it, you don't want it. I'd be off on the speaker circuit. I'd be making a small fortune. I wouldn't be looking back. I'd be cracking on.
I think you need to remember that from that line in her closing speech, when she said effectively that she leaves more convinced than ever about the need for sort of bold action. And that's why, when Emma was talking about the problems on reforms and what we need to get going to have Britain sort of building properly, and whether it's things like broadband, housing, and so much more. That's why you can't really tinker around the edges with this stuff. That's why she was right to try and sort of drive through. There was a whole ram-packed agenda she'd have got cracking into. And then obviously Rishi Sunak is picking up the threads.
Yes, you lead me nicely there, Asa, into my third Prime Minister in the last 3 years. It does sound a bit ridiculous when you say it like that, but we are where we are. Is he going to be the future? Is he going to sort it all out in the next year and a bit?
Well, I think the Tory party and the country need him to succeed. And certainly, while we look at the polls, and yes, Labour are sort of, 20 double digits ahead, it seems pretty consistent. I think he's going to be trying to chip away at that point for point. And we see with today's announcement on the deal with Albania that he is very much ready to tackle the sort of core issues that the voters who backed the Tories in 2019 will be thinking about. And crucially, in showing his seriousness on illegal immigration, he's trying to show that he has ideas, he's willing to get results. And no doubt we'll be able to see, that really come through in the figures over time.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward. We'll be coming on to that topic that Asa mentions a little bit later on in the programme, that 5-point Rishi Sunak plan. Did you see it? Do you sit there thinking, yes, that is the answer to the channel crossings? Or do you just think it's all more words and probably nothing's going to change? Emma, Rishi Sunak, is he the future? Is he going to sort everything out in the next year and a bit?
He's the next 18 months. There's a phrase that we use of caretaker prime minister. You kind of picture him in a janitorial, although when it comes to him, it'll be an £1,800 janitorial overalls.
Never pictured him in a janitorial.
The problem Rishi Sunak has is the same problem anyone stepping into that role would have. We have a very, very divided governing party. He is almost completely at the behest of his backbenchers, despite the fact that they've got still... we have so many independent MPs now. I've lost touch of how much... certainly not the 80-seat majority that was won at the last election, but they've still got a significant majority. But the party itself is split into so many parts that it's almost completely ungovernable and unmanageable.
Yeah, and we're in a situation already where we're seeing lots of Tory MPs saying that they won't contest the next election. Many of them have been very diplomatic, though, saying, oh, yeah, it's because of things like the boundary changes, not because of the future of the Tories. That doesn't really wash with me.
Well, in the words of Mandy Rice-Davis, well, they would, wouldn't they?
Yes. Jason says, Michelle, the reason that we've had 3 PMs in so many years is because we've got so many backstabbing MPs. It's nothing to do with how bad Boris was. He wasn't bad at all. Asa, you are much closer to this than any of us. Was that the case?
Well, it's interesting because I just quickly observed that Liz was elected by the members, and once the mini-budget came out, look, the markets, yes, they reacted badly, but also they can see if a government and a party is able to deliver on their agenda. And practically within days, you had the murmurs from the party about, from colleagues, how they didn't really back these things, how they wanted Liz to climb down. And so the markets all noticed. There was a vicious cycle she got pulled into.
Yeah, but that's Jason's point, because ultimately, you're quite right, there was a disconnect. The MPs wanted Rishi, the members wanted Liz. So what Jason's saying, quite succinctly there, is he reckons it was the MPs that never wanted Liz there in the first place, that couldn't accept the members' vote, that made it their mission to get rid of her.
But also it's disunity bred instability, and that,
But do you agree with Jason's point?
Well, I think it's that there were people who didn't back her, weren't going to back her, and practically were on strike from the moment she was elected. So that really showed.
And Jason, you'll be shouting at your screen, you'll be saying you reckon the backstabbing MPs first started on the whole Boris thing. I have to say, I don't necessarily disagree with you, and I think many people, many Tories at the next election, they'll look back and they'll realise that perhaps they got a little bit too ahead of themselves. Their egos got a little bit too big when they saw the results, because they, I think, took it for granted that a lot of these people in red wall seats that lent them their vote would perhaps do so again in the next one. I think they might have taken that for granted, and they might be in for a little bit of a shock. Were you one of those voters? Tell me your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk is their email. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk to you about striking. Should it be harder to go on strike? I'll have that and some of your thoughts on that last topic in just a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Hi there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, I've got the political commentator Emma Burnell and Asa Bennett, who's a former special advisor to Liz Truss. We've just been getting into that. I'm fascinated by special advisors. I'm going to find out, I'm going to speak to Asa afterwards and find out what does one do to become a special advisor. I'm fascinated. I want to be one. I mean, I don't know.
No, you don't. It's
Why?
a horrible job.
Well, actually, because I think, and no offence to you, but sometimes I do think, who advises these people? Like, what are they thinking? So, yeah, I'm
sure you can aim higher, MP, or sort of, House
PM.
of Lords. Yeah.
Me? No thanks.
You've got a speechwriter right here.
I've got a speechwriter, yeah. You'll get me saying growth. You can sit to my left, disagreeing with
I'll disagree with you. It'll make you very popular when I disagree with you.
Disagreeing with tax cuts, by the way. Disagreeing with tax cuts.
Disagreeing with tax cuts with nothing to back them up,
But,
yeah.
Emma, have you ever seen a tax cut you actually like?
Yes, I would cut taxes on most working people. It's just...
That's what she was going to do.
Well,
yes and no. Yes and no.
Well, it's funny you should say that, right? You say you
45%. I don't qualify for the 45p tax rate, so it certainly doesn't hit my household or the households of people round my way.
Well, you say you'd celebrate working tax cuts to working class people, which almost leads me nicely onto the strike situation, so it does, because the government is reportedly considering new legislation that would make it harder for some public sector workers, the like of nurses, etc., to go on strike. It's all basically about thresholds that would need to be met. And it's about, because I actually found these numbers quite interesting, that I would call them quite low, but ultimately what they're trying to do is say that unions would have to get half of their members to support industrial action before going ahead. I think that's, it's 40% at the moment, but I would say actually it should be 51%, so you're definitely in the majority of the people that are making the votes as opposed to right in the middle. Do you think it should be harder to go on strike, Emma?
I think the government do this all the time. Every time we get into a series of strikes, they start trying to deal with the strikes rather than the cause of the strikes. And it's just stupid. If you want to do that, let people vote electronically. Everyone else gets to vote electronically, but at the moment they won't let unions have these ballots electronically. So let them do that, and then if you want to mess around with the thresholds, they will almost certainly beat them. And some of these strikes, we're seeing 85%.
No, sorry, that doesn't wash with me. Because if people are in a situation, and I listen to these union leaders, they're saying, oh, people can't even afford to feed their own kids. If people are in that situation, surely they would then make the effort to vote, tick a box on a piece of paper and stick it in a post box. That's not too much of an effort if you literally can't feed your kids. What you're saying,
what I'm saying is
make it easier.
Make it harder and harder for them to get to this final decision, and they keep getting there because things are getting harder and harder at every point up to it. What I'm saying is it would be much more sensible, rather than just endlessly trying to repeat the action that comes at the very end of a negotiating process, which is strike. Actually, why don't you intervene much earlier so that we are not getting to the point where workers are feeling desperate enough to go without a day's wages to make this point?
But you've got a union, for example, one of the nurses ones, 19% there or thereabouts, I think they're requesting. Do you think that's a fair request?
Yes. because
Do you
that
think it should be
request
granted?
only takes them back to, in real terms, to what they were earning in 2010.
So do you think it should be granted?
We have 47,000 vacancies in nursing at the moment. You're not going to fill that by making nursing cheaper and harder to do.
Do you think it should be
You've got to
granted?
yes, of course it should be.
So
That
you
was my
think
first
nurses
question
get...
was yes, we should be paying nurses a decent wage so that we can attract people into it, so that we can actually
So
make it
19% of the
better and easier.
nurses?
Yeah.
Right, and how much is that going to cost?
I don't have the figures on that exact cost, but I think it's a reasonable request to go back to the standard of living you had 12 years ago.
Right, so then all of these other people, your firefighters, your train drivers, all of these people that are going on strike, they then see the nurses getting 19%. They're going to want the same or similar.
Well, they should all have... Nobody's cost of living, nobody's standard of living should go down because they choose to be a public servant. We are going to lose the talent that we need to run our public services if we don't pay people what they need to live a decent life.
And by the way, just for the record, as regular viewers will know, both my mum and sister are NHS workers, so they might be watching. My mum will be shouting at the screen, "Shut up, Michelle, we agree with Emma." In fact, it's actually we want 25%. She'll be shouting at me, telling me to shut up.
I'm with Michelle's mum.
I just always find this fascinating, where people think that you can find all this money from. Asa, where do you stand on it all?
Well, look, if you hand every union a blank cheque, then what happens for inflation? Obviously, what happens for, I think the government estimates that, let's say, it would cost basically every family in the country £1,000 a year extra to be able to afford all the demands. Granted, caveat applied. But at the same point, if you look at the broad picture of this, so the 19% being requested, similar demands, inflation busting pay rises from the unions. I just simply say this: it is more than many people are getting in the private sector, and so we're all going through hardships.
And what about the threshold to strike? So as you'll know, as I introduced at the start of the topic, there's conversation now about should the threshold be higher? Should it be more difficult to go on strike? Where do you stand on that?
Well, I think there'll be many people who be very sympathetic for this, but the trouble is, let's look at the RMT strikes happening this week. If memory serves, they have a mandate of about 90% of members voting for it.
91% initially voted in.
And then Michelle Hussein pointed out today to Mick Lynch that on Today programme that about 61%, I think, voted in the last to reject the last pay offer. So even if you take both of those as the mandates, they're above 50%. Yeah. This proposal would not stop what we're about to see this week.
I find this quite interesting because at the moment, as I was saying, it's 40% in that initial vote, and I just don't think that that's high enough in terms of the impacts that these strikes have.
40% is usually what gets you a government. So you get to be Prime Minister on 40%. I think you should be able to have a say over your workplace on 40%.
Do you?
Yeah.
What do you think at home? Do you think, well, you might even think 40% is too much. You might even be sitting there saying it doesn't even need to be as high as that. I don't know, there's just something about, and don't get me wrong, do not get me wrong, I want people to have a decent standard of living. There's something about the whole percentage conversation that doesn't really sit well with me, because if you're on the lower end of the scale and you get, I don't know, 5% or whatever, that's not a huge amount to you. No. Whereas if you're on 75 grand or whatever, your 5% is quite decent. So I would always like to be in a situation where those at the very lowest end of the spectrum in terms of pay, they are getting the biggest boost to their take-home pay. That's what I would really like to see. There's lots of conversations, people saying, oh, this nurse is going to a food bank and that nurse is going to a food bank and all the rest of it. I'm not really sure about that.
Well, that is happening. I mean, we are seeing that. We are seeing nurses getting to a point where they are unable to afford to feed their families, to heat their homes.
But what is the average wage of a nurse?
It's not high. I mean, it's in the high 20s, I think, which, given the way that costs have gone up, and again, it hasn't increased more than 1 or 2% over the last 10 years, which means that they are significantly... It's been like a significant pay cut year on year.
I'm going to say something, right? And some people will be quite angry at me for saying this and perhaps think it's controversial, but this food bank sentence, I feel that this has become a sentence that gets trotted out in order to prick conscience and to almost weaponise a situation. I feel that... I don't know, if I've got £50 disposable income at the end of my month and I've got to stretch it to absolutely everything, and then all of a sudden I can get a portion of my food for free from over there, why wouldn't I?
Because you have to qualify to go to a food bank. Their food banks are almost entirely done through referral. You have to be in hardship to be qualified to go to a food bank. It's not a case of rocking up and getting what's given to you.
Yeah,
and also, I mean, Michelle, I would love it if we didn't need to rely on food banks in this country. I'm disgusted that people have to go to food banks in this country. I think it's appalling that we live in a country where in one of the richest countries in the world, and so many of our citizens, and those citizens who are giving their time to work for our public services, are having to use food banks. I agree with you. I'd love it if we didn't use food banks. But unfortunately, at the moment, that's where we're at. It's a terrible short-term stopgap. What we need is a system that actually works for those nurses.
Do you have anything to come back on that point, Asa?
Not precisely that point, but just knowing that this strikes issue is going to run and run, because we've got the BMA voting with junior doctors, and so I think we'll be no doubt chewing it over, and the government's going to have to find an answer on the strikes.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know that people will be really upset and angry with me about the point that I'm making about food banks, but I just feel like that sentence, someone has to rely on a food bank, it has become this almost overused, weaponised statement. And don't get me wrong, I completely agree with you. I don't want anyone in this country to absolutely have to go to a food bank and literally that is the only way they can get food. They've cut their cloth, they've done everything possible and still they cannot afford food. That's not acceptable, particularly if someone is going to work, particularly in some cases if someone is going to work full-time. That's completely unacceptable, completely inappropriate. But I just worry and wonder if that ever is abused. You're telling me that absolutely I'm wrong. And I'll take that on the chin. I'm a big girl, I've got a massive chin. What do you make to it all? Get in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk. You guys are on about, Jay says, what planet does this woman live on? Me or Emma?
It's always me, Michelle.
He means you. Where is all this money going to come from? He's saying, and that is the interesting question. Where does a lot of this come from? Although I have to say, Jay, I can't help but notice whenever we're talking about giving nurses or whatever a pay rise, people always say, where is this money coming from? But then we seem to find millions and millions, don't we, for vanity projects or some crisis there and some crisis there. So we do seem to have magic money trees, don't we, when it seems to be appropriate. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk to you about the latest plan. There's plans every day, aren't they, these days? Today's plan is a 5-point plan from Rishi Sunak to deal with the boats crossing the channel. Have you seen it? What do you think to it? Is it going to make a blind bit of difference? Get in touch, tell me your thoughts, and I'll see you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening, and alongside me to do so, I have my panel, the political commentator Emma Burnell and Asa Bennett, who is the former special advisor to Liz Truss. You guys have been sending in your comments. Goodness gracious me, I think I've just been sworn at more times. In one tweet alone, I've just been sworn at 3 times. I'm referencing my ponderings on the food bank situation. I'm going to read some of those comments out in a couple of minutes, because lots of divided opinions are coming up and in my inbox. And if you disagree with me, by the way, just say you disagree with me. You don't need to swear at me. It's a bit strange. Anyway, one of these, Chris says, if public sector workers were given the same pay rises as MPs, they would have no need to strike. Interesting point you make there. Ivan says, Michelle, everyone has the right to withdraw their labour. It's the only option people have. Do not take it away from them. There should be no strikes, says Mark. If you don't like what you paid for, go and work somewhere else. Yes, but Mark, people shouting at the screen might say, well, I was fine with what I was being paid for when I applied for the job, but over time, my wages have been eroded by things like higher living costs. What do you do then? I don't know. You can tell me.
And we desperately need more people to be in nursing, not people leaving nursing.
We certainly do. I tell you, I really hope I don't get ill and none of my loved ones get ill anytime soon, because I do. I hear all these stories, I see all these experiences, and I just think, goodness me, just stay well, everybody. That's your best hope at the moment, isn't it? Anyway, let's talk plans, shall we? Rishi Sunak, our Prime Minister, has laid out his 5-point plan to solve the Channel crisis. Among other things, it'll mean that migrants from Albania who enter the UK legally will almost always be deported. We're going to have creation of a new unit to monitor boat crossings from France. Asa, before I come to you, let's recap the fact that we've had about 44,000 people cross the Channel this way so far this year. 5-point plan, do you reckon it's going to work?
I think it needs to work, particularly because he's the one announcing it. He's fronted it up. That shows he wants to own this plan and be held accountable for it. If he didn't, he'd have the Home Secretary or Home Office Minister fronted up. Instead, he wants to stamp his branding on this because he wants to show he's gripping it. And he's suggesting he wants to deal with the asylum backlog by next year. And, particularly, your viewers will very much remember what happened with the Rwanda scheme when the flights didn't even take off due to legal challenge. So I think that's what people will be expecting, to see clear action and the results to come through in the coming months.
Where do you stand, Emma?
We have to have a comprehensive immigration system that works. It has to have rules. It has to be enforceable. I don't trust the government to write good rules, and I certainly don't trust them to enforce it. One of the groups of people, referring to our last conversation, that are going on strike are the Border Force, who are feeling that they are also being treated appallingly, not paid properly, but also their conditions and their terms and conditions are very, very poor. If the people at the sharp end of this do not feel that they're able to do their jobs properly, that we aren't actually filling up that front end of the Border Force, making sure that there is proper, well-motivated staff doing those jobs, I can't see how this delivery is going to work at all. So whether or not it's a good plan, it probably doesn't matter, because it's almost certainly not going to be deliverable.
But he must think it's deliverable, or else why sit there and be so specific? I mentioned, by the way, this safe country thing when it comes to Albania. A new agreement and its approach has been agreed with the Albanian officials, including the Prime Minister. This will basically, Border Force officials are going to be at the airport for the first time to stop people trying to get into the UK illegally. New guidance will be issued for caseworkers that Albania is a safe country, which will mean that the majority of claims, that's a direct quote, are rejected, and thousands will be returned on weekly flights in the coming months until, I quote, all the Albanians in our backlog have been removed. Tough talk, that, isn't it?
absolutely, he set the bar high. And we also know that the case he put today was, it wasn't just, what he wanted to do, but what it was right to do. He was talking about, being necessary to then take on the people smugglers, the traffickers, and to make sure that people could still come here legally. He's got a very strong story and ability to be able to talk about this. But he obviously needs to clamp down quite rightly on illegal immigration, because that's what Tory MPs want to see, voters want to see, and what basically the hopes of the Tories being re-elected in 2024 rests on, among other things, of course.
Yeah, because the Tories must know that this issue in the Channel is something that a lot of people in working class communities will be really bothered by. Even if you're not one of those people that's bothered by this, you can't look at the optics of this situation and think it's not problematic. You've got people in 4-star hotels, Emma, and we're talking about cost of living crises, we're talking about people withdrawing their labour, so to quote you, they can afford to feed their children. And then across the road, you've got 4-star hotels being packed full with people who've just decided to get on a boat.
Well, there are a number of things that we could do that would make that a different thing. For a start, we should let people work while they're waiting for a response, so that we're not paying.
Crossings?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, as you have quite often put it, how can you have more crossings? If we let people work, so. You're saying that sitting in a 4-star hotel for 18 months doesn't incentivise them, but working for 18 months does?
Well, what I'm saying is
I think that while they're waiting for a decision, we should let them work so that they're contributing to the economy of the country and not costing money.
Well, what I'm saying is I think that a lot of these people that are coming from France, they're not really genuine asylum seekers. What they are is economic migrants. So if you actually make their economic situation better, then you will absolutely entice more.
What is better than sitting in a hotel room or working a day's work?
Well, if you're sitting in a hotel room...
one of those contributes to the country and the other doesn't. That's what I'm saying. It's just basic, simple economics.
If you're sitting in a hotel room, and I don't know, perhaps you might be working on the not necessarily legal economy...
So you prefer that?
You might be getting your... No, I would prefer that people were not able to just sit there, make up stories, get in a rubber dinghy and end up in 4-star hotels. So I would actually want a situation where if you've got a safe country such as Albania, you know full well, do not get on the boat because it's ludicrous. You won't be granted asylum.
I don't know whether this will work on that particular case, on the Albanian case in particular. We shall see. I think that there are certainly a deal to be, and I think Labour has said that they would do a similar approach with Albania. So I don't think this is particularly politically controversial.
Well, look,
but what I am saying is that I do not trust this government to deliver, and neither do the border force workers.
I've got to say, I agree with you on that point. We met there in the end. We got to a point of agreement at the end. I do think Emma raises a good point, though, and I know it will divide opinion. Do you think that these people that get into the dinghies, that end up in these hotels, whatever, do you think they should be allowed to immediately go to work? We hear all the time, don't we? We've got staff shortages absolutely everywhere. Is that the answer? I'm saying it'll just encourage more crossings, but I might be wrong. It has been known on occasion. So tell me your thoughts on Emma's idea there. Should you just be able to work, contribute to this economy? Let me know your thoughts. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk to you about diversity and inclusion. A report says the government is spending about £7 billion a year on so-called work projects. What does that even mean? You tell me what you think to it all, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through till 7 o'clock tonight alongside with the political commentator Emma Burnell and Asa Bennett, who's the former special advisor to Liz Truss. A new report out says the government is spending £7 billion a year on equality and diversity projects. This research was done by a group called Conservative Way Forward, who said that the money was going into things like art council courses on topics such as unlearning your whiteness. And it had employed thousands of people to implement diversity targets. I don't know why I laughed then, because some would say it's a very serious topic indeed. What do you make to all of this, Asa?
So look, the government spends £1 trillion a year, and so $7 billion in some ways is, to put it in context, it's still big on its own terms, and certainly if you're looking to make efficiencies, particularly because we're discussing earlier about how much money can be spent on for nurses, $7 billion is about tens of thousands of nurses' salaries, for example. And if I just pull out, make 2 quick points. One, we can all agree that diversity should be a good thing, particularly to have a breadth of talent to pull on. That's why, that's what the spirit of levelling up is effectively about, that, making sure that across the country you can have the same opportunities. But then if I just pull out, the problems here, that let's take the unconscious bias training that's, what public money is spent on.
Yeah.
We know, and I'm particularly aware of this because I worked with the Government Equalities Office, with Liz, that unconscious bias training, there's no evidence it works. If anything, it helps antagonise people, it can backfire, it reminds people of their differences rather than bringing them together. So, there really is a lot of fat we can trim here.
Yeah. Emma Burnell, your thoughts?
I sort of agree with Asa in many ways. I think we go through kind of cycles of different types of diversity training, and they do swing from one type to another. What I think diversity is incredibly important, so that we get the absolute
diversity of what?
Anywhere. Diversity of everything. So one of the things I would really like to see, which unfortunately never happened, is the enactment of the clause in the Equalities Act 2010 that actually said we should have more account of socio-economic diversity, i.e. bringing through working class talent as much as we're talking about race, gender, ethnicity, religion, all of those things. We need to make sure that workplaces are comfortable places for everybody to flourish in and give their best. And that needs to be tested. So I absolutely believe that we should be looking at how to make those places diverse and accessible for people with disabilities, for example, making sure that people don't feel that they are discriminated against in their workplace. But we must test how that's working, because we're just saying these things happen and it's a magical thing that we're just going to say that this works. I think monitoring and evaluation is an incredibly important part of any type of training. So we have to make sure that we are actually testing that it's achieving its goals. Otherwise, I don't see the point.
Yeah, I've got to say, everyone talks about diversity and it's all about your skin colour or your sexuality or whatever. One thing that annoys me is there's very little focus done on diversity of thought, because people have different opinions. And if you looked at so much output from these diversity things and these daft new words everyone's got to say and these new labels and this and that and all the other, it's almost like, to me, it's not inclusive at all. It's indoctrination. And everyone now must think like this, use this terminology, do this, be like this, speak like this. And it's about indoctrinating people. But actually, where is the permissibility, or is that a word? word? Have I just made that word up? Anyway,
Absolutely
whatever.
bang on.
Yeah. Oh, is that a proper word?
It really is.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll take that. Good. I like it when I use right words and I use them properly. But where is the ability to actually be able to think differently in this society? I don't know. I'm going to throw it to you at home. That, for me, is one element that is really missed out of all this diversity stuff. Lots and lots and lots of you are in contact with me about that food bank situation. I've been sworn at quite a bit. Luckily for me, I'm quite a tough northern girl. I probably know what more swear words than some of you guys, but I'll refrain from using them. What you have inspired me to do, though, is actually have a proper debate about this, because I think that the sentence, people relying on food banks, has become weaponised, politicised. Dave says, I've worked at a food bank and the lady is wrong. Not everybody has to qualify. Some people absolutely do take advantage. Dave, you've inspired me. I'm going to have this on properly another day. Emma, Ace, I've enjoyed tonight. Thank you. That's all I've got time for. Up next is Nigel Farage. Nigel, good evening. What have you got for us?
Michelle, good evening. A new 5-point plan from the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak that he says will solve the migrant crisis. I'll debate that tonight point by point and ask you to respond. Do you think Rishi Sunak's plan will solve the problem? Because I've got to tell you, I don't. But before all of that, let's get the all-important weather.
Good evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. Turning cold once more out there under largely clear skies. Could be icy almost anywhere, but particularly we've got snow showers over northern Scotland. And there is some wet weather coming into the southwest, courtesy of this area of low pressure. There's some mild air mixed in with that, but it's never quite reaching us. We are staying blue, we're staying cold. Cold front bringing more snow showers across northern Scotland, so a further few centimetres possible here. A few wintry showers scattered across eastern England and for Northern Ireland could turn things icy. And this wet weather coming into the south